Moriden Athluan.
The champion of Kinneret. Moriden showed the beauty of nature by finding renewal for the great and glorious Gildergreen of Whiterun, providing a place of worship for all manner of men and mer.
The champion of Daibella, the only man to enter the most sacred places of the temple in Markat and live. He, who found out the Daibellian symbol and returned her to the temple, so that all could hear the will of the great goddess.
The messenger of Mara, whose small words and influence sparked two of the greatest love stories of all time in Skyrim.
Moriden was at the height of his goodly deeds when word reached him of a new threat to Skyrim and its people.
Like the mighty champion of the people he had become, he looked up to the role of the people's champion once again and set off to destroy the vampire threat.
Come closer and hear the story of how he destroyed one of the oldest threats to
Still
man
searching
and
for stories about me, I see. I hate to disappoint you, but this portion of my story, you won't find a single bard who knows what he's talking about. That's fine now. We have time, my friend. I can tell it far better than they can, as they tell it for entertainment, not because it is truth. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Prologue. I am Moriden Athluan, a former beggar from the streets of Windhelm. I allowed my anger and my need for vengeance to drive my actions, and left the city taking up arms with the Imperial Legion. I was on the forefront of the battles that brought down the allies of the Stormcloak Rebellion, a noble warrior who risked his life for the betterment of Skyrim and the Empire. I am Moriden Stormkiller, a legate of the Imperial Legion who, at the conclusion of the Civil War, put the blade to the rebel Jarl Ulfric Stormcloak's throat, and ended his life in as ignoble a fashion as he could have feared. I ended a rebellion, and earned eternal glory among the legions. I am Moriden Stormcrown, heir to Talos Stormcrown, better known as Talos of Atmora, or Tiber Septim the First. The first man or mer to be bestowed the dragon blood since the loss of the Septim dynasty at the end of the Third Era. I ascended the 7,000 steps, learned the nature of the voice, and was acknowledged as Dragonborn, the one who would save Nirn from the dragon threat. I am Moriden Godstouched. I replaced a dead tree with a new one that brought glory to Kinnereth's name. I had found and brought the new Sibyl of Daibella to Markarth and its people, ensuring the goddess would continue to speak to her people. I have spread the love of Mora from Ivarstead to Markarth to Whiterun, keeping her promises in the front of all their minds. All of these things are true. All of these things are rubbish. I never served anyone except myself. For many, this was as far as my story could be told. Nobody wanted to hear about my role in the Vampire War. Nobody wanted to hear about my relations with the Daedric Lords. The bards would have you believe that I did all of these things to contain their power, to set up their destruction from within their own ranks. The truth is not what the bards would have you believe. "26 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. I had cast aside any notion of dedicating myself to the gods. They may be a path for others, but were certainly not my path. Instead, I had decided, after a long bout of thinking it through last night, that I had 3 immediate things that I could apply myself to. First, the Dawnguard. Having seen the results of a vampire attack on the Hall of the Vigilance, I was curious to see what forces could be mustered against them. Their base of operations was a fort long abandoned in the southeast corner of the rift, close by and convenient for travel. Second, having abandoned the idea of the gods being a part of my existence, I thought on the choices of my ancestors, which brought me, quickly, to Aedra. A conversation some weeks ago told me that there was a massive shrine to the Daedric Prince of the Dawn in northern Skyrim, near Winterhold. I had little hope that this would provide anything of worth either, but I would be stupid to dismiss generations of Dunmeri worship out of hand. Third, the museum. Anything I did, anywhere I went, I would be able to provide more to the museum, a living monument to my own glory and greatness. This meant that any rumor that might lead to something of significance I needed to pursue. Already I had 3 such rumors and tasks. The armor of the Crusader was supposedly in Skyrim, scattered across its face. The Sword of the Red Eagle, a local provincial legend, could possibly be found as well. And last, there was a book I found on the Dwemer that indicated that there might be some new forging location that might be of interest as well. So it was that I began my work, heading for Dayspring Canyon and the Dawnguard. The castle was impressive enough, I suppose, but the people on watch were less than vigilant, shall we say. I was passed through to meet the leader of the Dawnguard, a gruff man calling himself Isran. My introduction to him was quick. He was arguing with the Vigilant of Stendar, which it sounds like Isran used to be, when I arrived. Isran's face fell when he heard that the Vigilants had all but fallen, that Keeper Karset was dead, along with most of their order here in Skyrim, in the attack on the hall. He seemed about to reply to that news when he saw me. He froze, his expression torn between incredulity and hope. "Stormkiller," he said, almost in wonder. I sighed. I hate that name, even if I earned it rightly. In this case, it also meant he didn't have to waste time asking if I knew one end of a sword from the other. No, he had another use for me entirely. With the Vigilance gone, the Dawnguard is playing catch-up. Something that the Vigilants were looking into seems to have spurred the vampires into motion, prompting the attack. While the Dawnguard continues to build their forces and rally the remaining Vigilants, he wants me out in the field running interference. In this case, that means he wants me to go to Dim Hollow Crypt, a site the Vigilants were investigating. According to the Vigilant, there was evidence that there was something of significance there, some kind of vampire artifact, was their best guess. So with a quick mention of my name, I was sent off to help the cause, assuming I even take it up. These men are either grizzled veterans at the end of their useful fighting days, or raw recruits who barely know how to swing a sword, and no middle of the road. Depending on what I find, I may leave these to their own devices. Dim Hollow Crypt is located near Dawnstar, in an area I've been near a few times in the last month, but never actually entered. That being the case, my second objective is along the way in Winterhold. I rode straight past Windhelm, sparing a moment only to spit in its direction as I passed the entry bridge arches and went up into the mountains. The vampire situation is pressing, I do not doubt, but the Dawnguard needs time, not for me to rush in and draw an even stronger reaction as soon as possible. To that end, I will visit the Shrine of Aedra first, and see if the ancestors have something to show me. I am a spirit walker, after all. Why should there not be? Though, as I approached the shrine, I did have to wonder, how did anyone manage to build a statue so large to her without it being long since torn down and destroyed? For the Dunmer there is respect for Aedra, but to everyone else, she remains a Daedric lord. While she is not considered inherently evil, she is still barely tolerated. The idea that her shrine is left standing is an oddity for the Nords. Aranea, I wouldn't go so far as to call her a priestess, but her position is similar in many respects, greeted me by name before I had given it. Yes, Isran had known who I was as well, but that was in a warmer clime, with my face uncovered, and so easily seen. Here in the frozen mountaintops I was wrapped to my eyes in furs. As a demonstration of power goes, it got my attention. Even more so when she also claimed that she had seen a vision of this day, granted by Aedra, long before I'd ever been born. She wasted no time in preaching or other such nonsense. She named me as Aedра's chosen champion, Spirit Walker, and laid before me a task, or at least the beginnings of one. You must go to a fortress threatened by water but untouched by it. There you will find an elven mage whose touch can turn the brightest star to darkness. Stories of Aedra are filled with such signs, and they were rarely, if ever, wrong. Aranea believes the fortress to be Winterhold itself, and the description does seem to fit. Where better also to find a mage of any stripe than in the city outside the college. Maybe I'm letting my beliefs in the ancestors overwhelm my good judgment, but this does not feel like the empty mutterings of someone trying to control my fate, but the shadowed words of someone who has already seen it and gives direction. I agreed to look into Winterhold, and while I have a suspicion of what the star being referenced might be, I will wait and see what happens. I thought that if there was any good place to start in the ruins of the city, it would be at its inn. Rumors and gossip, though usually wrong on many fronts, do have their uses when looking for bits of information. Enough so, anyhow, to at least point one in the right direction. My luck, or Aedра's foreknowledge, held good. I walked in as the innkeep was speaking with one of his long-term residents, an elven mage called Nelakar. Since this mage met two of the three things I'd been told to look for, I got his attention and asked about the clue I'd been given. His face closed off instantly, and the hostility in his voice was clear. After he ranted for a moment or two, he asked who'd sent me. I shrugged and told him, and when Aedра's name was brought up, his manner changed just as abruptly. Nelakar claims to be the only sane survivor of a mad mage's experiments with soul gems. I've some experience with them myself. I've been dabbling in enchantments here and there, so was able to follow his musings. There is only one gem that does not shatter when it is used, and it happens to relate to Azura. Azura's star was being used by Nelakar's master as part of his experiments, initially an attempt to learn why it did not shatter as all other gems did. Later, it was to find a way to hold his own soul as his body began to decay around him from disease. It felt a murder, of course. It usually does when madness sets in. Nelakar believes the madness to be Azura's revenge, but he doesn't know Azura's ways. I've heard enough to know that she does not take direct action. She instead manipulates fate in other ways. No, the madness was more likely to be the result of the disease that was killing Malyn Varen, I think. My opinion doesn't matter, however. He told me where the star was, with Varen, at Ilinalta's keep, at the lake of the same name. Out of the way. But with a horse now, something I think I should act on before I go to Dim Hollow. 27 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. Leaving the inn early, I pushed my horse hard. Lake Ilinalta in Whiterun Hold was not overly distant when your mount is properly motivated, and I rode along the southern shores as the sun rose. The place I sought, however, was on the north shores, caught between shore and mountain, as Nelakar described it. It took some hours more to find, but when I located the tower of the old Ilinalta keep rising from the water, I knew I'd found the right place. Given the nature of what Malyn is supposed to be doing, I shouldn't be surprised that there were no guards or lookouts. Most of those who could fill that function are likely dead, sacrificed to his experiments, which means if I encounter anything, it will be skeletons and other undead. Varen has gone this far in search of immortality, so I doubt he'll hesitate at a bit of light necromancy. The place was, as expected, damp and moldy. These descriptions also extended to the necromancers who were, surprisingly, still alive in the front chambers of the complex. As sentries, though, they were not exactly exemplary. Then again, it is doubtful they were expecting anyone to show up in the first place. Skeletons and dark practitioners of magic aside, however, there was little of interest to the site, other than its remote nature, of course, which was exactly what Malyn wanted. I stalked the hallways, giving out what the necromancers tried to avoid: death. Though there was a certain irony in killing them just for their bodies to be raised again moments later by their former compatriots, I did not take the time to even chuckle over it. I don't know that I have ever said it, but there is something that everyone, except the necromancers, of course, agree on. Necromancy is a curse, a blight upon the world, and those that practice it should be removed from existence. In the end, I never faced the mad necromancer. He was already dead, though I'm not entirely certain he has gone completely. At the top of the tower, behind the defenses of two talented necromancers, who, needless to say, are not masters of death any longer, I found what looked, almost, to be a throne room. Skeletons and bones were strewn everywhere, but of particular note were two bodies. The first, looking as though the body had been dead for years and holding an elaborate star-shaped item in its lap, was what I assume to be Malyn's body. The star is likely Azura's star, but it looks broken. Something for Nelakar to look at. He's the only real expert on the artifact at this point, if this body is Varen's. The second, and the reason I believe that Varen may still be around, in a way, was a young woman in mage robes. Her body, though, was fresh, perhaps only hours old. Nelicar indicated that it was possible, even likely, that the Mad Mage was using the death of his students and acolytes to fuel his research and experiments. Given what I'm seeing, he continued that practice, and this woman was the last one to give her life, which means that, broken or not, Malin's soul may well be in the broken star. The white star has been made black, as Azira predicted, except it isn't Nelicar who did this, as the vision indicated. There is perhaps still more to the story. I exited the ruin and began making my way back to Winterhold, again strongly encouraging my horse. He'd been standing around all day doing nothing, after all, so he can run as fast as I ask him to. On the ride back, something occurred to me. Why should I take the star back to someone who clearly hates the being it represents? Oh, no doubt he might be able to repair it, but why would he? Surely he would do something to more permanently damage it instead, prevent its use in any form. No, it made far more sense to take it back to Aranea and see if we could get Azira herself to make the needed repair. It was, after all, her artifact. I did this, and was surprised when Aranea stepped aside and told me that Azira wanted to speak to me directly, something that the so-called divines had never lowered themselves to. I was somewhat nervous, I admit, but I did as I was asked. Having a Daedric Lord speak to you directly is not for the faint of heart. Their words resonate in your head in a way I can't describe. The conversation was short, thankfully, but it confirmed what I had surmised. Malyn Varen was in the star. What I thought more interesting, though, was Azira's offer. She would send me into the star to clear Malyn out. After that, the star and its enduring properties would be mine to use as I wished. No additional tasks, no strings. A small task for her in exchange for a rather large reward, really. And if she seemed to hesitate slightly when she made that offer, I didn't notice it at the time. I agreed, and with a disorienting feeling, as if moving at speeds far greater than I ever had before, I was sent into the star. It was quickly apparent, once I could make sense of what I was seeing again, that I was not alone. Malyn Varen stood before me, thinking I was a soul sent in by his disciples to be a snack for him. At a guess, he has to consume souls to maintain himself in this stasis he thinks he had created. Something, however, tipped him off that such was not the case, and he retreated deeper into the gem, sending summoned Daedra to destroy me. That didn't go well for them. In the end, I struck Malyn down with an axe from behind. I'd call it an ignoble death, but he was already dead. His body had only just hit the crystalline floor when I was returned to reality. Azira cleansed the star and presented it to me, holding to her end of the bargain. Then she added in something extra. "What the future requires, I must provide," she said. "For Nirn to heal, it first must burn. I prepare you now for what you must become. I grant you the ability to sense the presence of the Daedric Lords." And there was a definite pause in her words this time, before she added, almost to herself, "What must be done has been done. The die is cast." The Lord of Twilight refused to answer my questions about her statements. I hammered at the altar for half an hour, demanding explanations. All I received were cuts on my hands, cold through my body, and the startled stares of Aranea. I left the shrine, angry, bound for the inn at Winterhold.